Today on Leaf by Leaf, The Desert and Its Seed by Jorge Barón Biza. What is in the waters in Patagonia that gives rise to these extraordinary writers? Borges, Cortázar, Casares, Sabato, Ocampo, Arlt, and now Jorge Barón Biza, who, at least outside of Spanish-speaking communities, is virtually unknown. And as Facundo Melillo told me on Goodreads, there are still quite a few Argentinians awaiting their English translation, and they are great books. Despite working as a translator, Jorge Barón Biza translated an early work of Proust's, an editor and journalist in Argentine publishing houses, and despite having a father of literary note, Raúl Barón Biza, Jorge's manuscript for The Desert and Its Seed was rejected, and he self-published it in 1998, 3 years before he committed suicide, which lends a chilling and sobering aura to the book. A true story which is already devastating, and its rendering which is nothing short of gutting and perfect. This is autobiographical fiction, and Nora Avaro's afterword in the back of the book sharpens all of the connections beautifully. In this book, Jorge becomes Mario, the parents become Aaron and Elijah. And so yes, this is a roman à clef for Raúl Barón Biza and Clotilde Sabatini, and that harrowing moment when, at the end of their divorce mediation in Raúl's apartment in Buenos Aires, with their lawyers and young Jorge present, Raúl threw acid across Clotilde's face. She was rushed to the hospital, and subsequently Raúl committed suicide in his bedroom. Thus ensued grueling years of attempts at reconstructive surgery, first in Argentina and then for a long stint in Italy. In the book, Barón Biza picks up from that moment of the attack, denying an observation of the history of the tumultuous marriage, which he says was basically a series of divorces and reconciliations, containing, as it did, both passionate love and passionate hate. What elevates this otherwise autobiographical journalism to enduring art is Barón Biza's art critic's eye for detail, for such he was for a number of assignments, and the linking of the deterioration of Eligia's face, that is, beauty, to the views of the deterioration of Argentina, specifically the Argentina of the latter 20th century. The first 15 pages are given largely to excruciating detail of the state of Eligia's face just after the attack, but it is done in a mode that I found engrossing and captivating, especially when linked to the macrocosmic proportion of a nation. This blending of clinical detail and art is a strong blend. He says the unmistakable features of her identity were vanishing forever. And then he'll turn around and display his acumen for the artistic detail coupled with that clinical treatment of what's going on. Something incredible was happening to her cheeks, that is Eligia. The partial ablation left contours of flesh that increased the depth of the cavities, where the bubbling of colors offered a false exuberant sensation, like the violent painting of an artist intoxicated with a strange power. After Argentine doctors do what they can to stop the activity of the acidic deterioration and remove as much of the necrosis as they can, Mario goes with his mother, Eligia, to Italy, specifically Milan, for the reconstructive surgery, or rather something like 22 attempts at surgery. This begins the largest portion of the text, which brings out much political and cultural commentary, made all the more effective by putting Italian sentiments against South American sentiments. Jorge/Mario himself was an Argentine Italian. His mother was Italian. And indeed, there is a large history of Italian immigration into Argentina. A cursory glance at the statistics yields Italians began arriving in Argentina in large numbers from 1857 to 1940, totaling 44.9% of the entire post-colonial immigrant population, more than any other country, including Spain. This is something I did not realize. This Milanese milieu also affords Barón Biza depictions of sentiments, such as the positive view of Il Duce, seeing him as an ideal with an unfortunate ending. We also get views into the condescending attitude of Italians towards South Americans. As one character says to Mario, "How can there be fruit works by Arcimboldi in your country? There isn't enough culture down there." Speaking of Arcimboldi, there is a rumination on his works that also exemplifies Barón Biza's abilities at art criticism. But this is also one of a handful of connections to the great Chilean writer Roberto Bolaño and the posthumously published 2666, which came out 3 years after this author's death. From the desert to the abyss to Arcimboldi, there are a handful of similarities to Bolaño. While in Milan, Mario tries to balance caring for his mother while spiraling downward at the hands of alcohol and a series of escapades with a prostitute named Dina. I will say that there is one scene in particular that puts the shocking bit in Philip Roth's Portnoy's complaint to shame. Not that shock was Barón Biza's main motive, but it is very effective. Throughout these months and months of letting himself go, we get this refrain that Mario is an enemy of violence, and the contempt for his father is palpable. He despises his father's books and tosses them off as operatic pornography, and excerpts from several of Raúl Barón Biza's actual works are in this book. But as time goes on, we begin to see patterns that bring the two nouns from the title into focus: desert and seed. This leads to an ending that, at least for me, was both unexpected and brutal. It should be noted that this book is indicative of the age of criticism. I recently read Randall Jarrell's essay of the same name, The Age of Criticism, in which he makes many points, one of which is that people are reading and writing criticism of literature more than the literature itself. People are dismissing, say, Ulysses and Moby Dick as something they've already read before, maybe one time, and opting for work after work that explains the original work. In this novel, The Desert and Its Seed, we get a glimpse of that impulse toward elevating criticism. Many people around Mario toss theories of Piaget and Freud around conversationally. A writer Mario meets later touts some criticism he's working on and the Academy, which Mario humorously puts in check. And then in the end, Barón Biza himself takes the time to explicate some of the book's symbols, though through the avatar of Mario, of course. I suppose that Biza too was unable to resist this demand for explanation. But I will say, because of the force of all that takes place in the book and the obvious patterns that are emerging, it almost begs for him to do so. That is, in this case, it doesn't diminish the work, it enhances it. At a little over 200 pages, it's almost impossible how much ground Barón Biza covers. An effective insider's view of horrific true events, an Argentine's view of the latter half of 20th century political history, an extensive treatment and application of Paul de Man's Prosopopoeia. Barón Biza underscores this rhetorical device in an epigram to the 10th chapter, using the ruination of, deterioration of, and futile attempts to restore Eligia's original beauty as metaphor for understanding that what once was is gone, and an attempt to bring what once was into the present is in vain, should strike the heart of any reader. This realization comes to the fore of Mario's consciousness when, late in the book, he finds himself on a train packed with college students. It becomes very apparent that the times have changed. He overhears things like, "I wear a beret because that's what the Cubans do," and capitalist complacency is causing party members to stay home watching television instead of attending meetings. He thinks to himself, "I would like to chat with some of these students, but these days, no one talks about nature. I would sound ridiculous." And then, as the final moment of that chapter, which gets at the same truth as Beckett in Godot, a student on the train asks, "But does anyone know when we'll arrive?" This short book is unsettling because of its level of depth and veracity. After I finished it, I couldn't read anything for several days. It is real, it is raw, and it is a great argument that sometimes art, such as the novel, can present truth more powerfully than nonfiction.